Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm going to be working with Tavistock Tutors on their U.S. educational advising system, helping you through the process if you choose to apply to American universities. I was raised and educated in the U.S. and went to both undergraduate and graduate school there. I went to Wellesley as an undergraduate, where I majored in political science and did a minor in chemistry. I then went on to a U.S. law school, where I graduated having been a note editor with the International Law Journal, so I've had lots of experience within the U.S. system, both undergraduate and graduate. I then started teaching the LSAT, which is the law school admission test, and got very interested in education. I started then teaching SATs, GMATs, ACTs, GREs, and basically the whole range of U.S. standardized tests. The U.S. system is a very different system from most other systems in that schools are independent of one another. There's no government control over anything, and they each have their own specializations, their own things that they're good at, and they each possibly even have their own application. State universities are very different from private ones, and there's different processes depending on where it is you want to go. Some of the things you have to think about, first of all, is why would you want to go to the U.S.? You've got to think about the U.S. system a little bit and what it has to offer. It is a broad-based education system that wants you to think about all the possibilities that you might not have engaged in high school. You have a limited number of courses you can take in high school, and once you get to university, the entire world opens up in terms of what your interests might be and what your needs might be. The American system is quite different from most other systems in that you can choose whatever it is that you want to do. You might do something like mathematics and music. You might want to combine anthropology with economics. Your interests are limited only by your own imagination, and whatever it is that you choose to do, most universities will be able to accommodate those needs. What will you need in order to apply? I would say the closest thing the U.S. has to the UCAS system is the Common App. The Common App is a system that allows you to apply to a number of universities, those of whom use it, through one main application. And then you complete supplements for the individual universities that you might be interested in applying to. That means you've got to write some essays. There will be essays in the main Common App, and there will be essays in the supplements. Be careful, some schools don't use the Common App at all. Particularly state schools. California, for example, doesn't do it, but generally the schools you will be considering, you can find out in advance whether they are a Common App system or whether they have their own system, and then you can apply appropriately. You should apply to a range of universities. You shouldn't limit yourself just to the best. You should consider what their admission policies are and then what your grades are and compare one to the other. And you might find that you stack up very well against some of the best schools, but you also might find that you need to get into a slightly bigger range. So it's always best to consider the dream schools, the ones you'd love to go to if you could, the reasonable schools, the schools that you might get accepted by given your current performance, and then you ought to have some safety schools. Whether you have those in the U.S. system or whether you have those in your own system is totally up to you, but you really ought to think about having them. So for most applications, you're going to need 5 to 6 elements, putting together your profile for the universities and thinking about what it is that they're going to want to see from you. So they're going to want to see 5 to 6 things. I will list them first and then give you some details about each one. They're going to want to see your high school grades first and foremost. They're then going to want to see, if they require them, standardized exams. They are going to want to see your support from your school, teacher references, counselor references. They're also going to want to see your extracurricular activities, what you've done in high school that makes you unique. And then they also want to see what you've done application essay-wise, and that's an element that you're going to control and present to them exactly what it is that you want them to know about you. Lastly, you might get offered an interview. That has an element of the application. Some schools interview everyone. Some schools interview only the people they're particularly keen on. So keep all those things in mind. I'll now go through the details of each one. So high school grades, all your grades will be considered. Whatever grades you've earned in high school or whatever grades you're predicted, those are the first elements of your application, and those are probably the most important elements for most universities. They're going to want to see how you've performed in your own system, and those are really important part of the process. If you haven't really started yet, make sure that you get the best grades you possibly can. If you have grades already, you're going to have to live with those and present whatever it is that you've done so far in high school. Next are standardized exams. These are in some cases very important to universities. In some cases, they're not important at all. You have to think about, can you take them? Are you going to do well on them? You should prepare for them the best you can. You have a choice between SAT 1 and ACT for most schools. And then the most competitive schools will also want to see subject tests from you. SAT 2s in 1, 2, and in some cases even 3 different subjects. So be aware of what you have and think about what you've done in high school and what you might be able to use towards your choice of SAT subject tests. The next thing you will need is support from your school. This comes in the form of references. Most universities want to see a reference from a counselor. This can be your head of sixth form. It can also be the deputy head. Some students even get a reference from their headmaster or headmistress. Next, you will need 2 teacher references for most schools. Some schools require only 1, some schools require none. It just depends on where you're applying. So be careful of that and find out what the requirements are. Do not think that just because you have a particular interest, you need to get a reference from a teacher in that department. You can get your references from whichever teachers are going to give you the best possible reference. Next, you have your application essays. These are really important. You have a chance to present yourself in the best possible way that you can. Currently, the Common App wants 650 words from you in a main essay in a choice of 5 topics. You have to be careful which topic you choose, but the most important thing is to write your best essay and then make it fit one of the topics. Usually students find they have much more to say about themselves than 650 words will allow, so it's a question of cutting and refining and honing your language to give the best, most interesting thing you can about yourself. Lastly are your extracurricular activities. Now these are really important. If you have interests outside of the classroom, you should pursue those to the highest level you possibly can. Get really good at something. Show leadership, show teamwork, show motivation and initiative. All those things that they ask the teachers about are important for you as well. And the more expert you can become at anything you choose to pursue, the better it will be once you come to apply. If you're in your final year and you haven't done very much, you might consider a gap year and do something in the summer, and that would give you at least something to be able to write about in your application process and in your essays. Lastly, some schools offer interviews. These are very different from UK and other systems because in the American system, they're trying to find out who you are as a personality. They're less worried about your academics because you're not applying to a particular discipline the way you are in other systems. In the States, they just want to find out, are you going to be an interesting roommate? Are you going to be fun around campus? Are you going to be a person that everyone's going to want to get to know and get along with? And that's the sort of thing you need to present when you present yourself to an interviewee. Usually it will be conducted in your home country with an alumni of the university to which you've applied. So don't worry too much about the interview. It's an easy process and it can be actually fun. You meet some very interesting people in the process and you learn about the school at the same time. Now, unless you're very young, you need to think carefully about what it is that you offer the university right now. You've got your grades. They're probably already pretty much in place. You've got your extracurricular activities, and again, those are as good as they're going to be. And so the most important 2 areas you can think about changing are your application essays and your standardized exams. So prepare for those well, think about those, and spend the time to make those as good as you possibly can, and therefore make yourself the best candidate you possibly can be. Admission in the US is not conditional. When you're given a place or admitted to a university, it will not be conditional upon your final grades. However, most universities expect you to meet or at least come close to your predictions if that's how you're applying. Now, when should you apply? You apply a year in advance of the year you want to enter. And there are 2 different times of application. One is called early and the other is called regular. With early applications, you generally will find that you have November 1st as a deadline. That means everything that the university requires from you will be required to be done by November 1st. Now that means if you have tests you need to have taken them by November 1st. If you have an application that you need to submit everything by that deadline. Not all schools have this early program, but if you are interested in applying early, it's something worth considering because it does give you an answer, whether you're in, admitted, or deferred, rolled into regular is what they often call it, or rejected outright. You know this before the Christmas holidays. You generally get your admissions by mid-December. That means you know midway through your senior year that you don't have to worry any longer about your admission. You have a place, which is great. It means you can then concentrate on your academics and your extracurriculars for the remainder of the year. Now, there are two types of early admission. There's early decision and early action. With early decision, you choose one university, you apply there, and you sign a contract. Your parents sign that contract and your school signs that contract. It means that if admitted, you have agreed to attend that university. This is a worldwide binding admission process. You need to withdraw every other application you might have made between November 1st and when you are admitted. Once you're admitted to the US in this system, you go. Now, that may not suit everyone. So there are also schools that offer something called early action. Early action is binding only on the university, not on the student. It means you can then apply to other universities in the meantime and go through the regular process with all your classmates and find out in April that you have several other schools that you might prefer to go to, and you don't need to go to the early action school. You just have that place if they've given you a place early. You have that comfort level, and so you know in mid-December that you have an admission that you might later use later on in the year if you haven't had a place from anywhere else that you prefer. So those are two types of admissions: early action, early decision, and it's very strategic as to which you apply to. That's something that you will consider, and I will help you through that process of how you will place yourself best, whether it's an early decision application, an early action one, or whether you're not ready at all, and therefore you're going to apply in the regular round. Now, the regular round, generally the deadline is January 1st. Some schools have deadlines slightly later than January 1st, but again, it's typical that you need to be ready by January 1st. So if you're not ready by November, you apply then a couple of months later in January to all the other schools that you might be interested in. So what are your deadlines in the regular? January 1st or later, and then you will know your results by late March, early April. You then have a month until May 1st to make that final decision as to where you're going to go. Which one university you choose to attend, you need to tell them by May 1st. That means you would withdraw all your other applications from other systems if you decide that a May 1st US school is what you really want. You could even turn everybody down and stay in your home country. That's no problem. But remember, if you have a conditional offer in your home country, you might want to choose the American unconditional one, and then you're secure through the summer and you know where it is you're going to be in September. So if you need someone who has lots of experience and can give you the ins and outs of how to get through these exams, give me a ring, send me an email, and we'll take it forward from there.